everyone. I'm Jaime Agostino, and this is Financial Minds Meet the Experts. On this show, we're joined by industry experts to talk about topics, trends, and themes that credit union professionals need to know about. Today on Financial Minds Meet the Experts, we are finishing our 4-week series, The Evolution of Credit Unions. Today's focus, information technology. Joining me is Ron Longley, Director of Hybrid Infrastructure, and Jared Ness, Account Executive with Arraya Solutions. Welcome and thanks for joining me. Ron, Jared, why don't you tell our listeners and viewers a little bit about yourselves?
Sure, I'll go first. So as you mentioned, my name is Ron Longley. Practice Director for our Hybrid Infrastructure practice at Arraya Solutions. And I know that's a mouthful, but really it includes our data center, cloud, and networking lines of businesses. I've been with Arraya 13 years, in the industry 22 years. My time at Arraya has ranged from delivery engineer in the data center space. Did that for a few years, spent a couple of years as a delivery manager in the same space of data center. But really since 2013, I've been helping customers like yourself architect and design solutions to address technical and business challenges with different products and solutions from our strategic partners. So that's been my life for the last going on 9 years now. So that's a little bit about me.
All right, great. Thanks. Thanks for sharing. Jared, what about yourself?
Yeah, this is Jared Ness, account manager with Arraya. I've been with Arraya a little over 7 years and been in the technology industry for about 13. And a lot of the experience I've had has been with helping financial institutions, credit unions in particular, and a lot of focus around data center and networking, security, and excited to have the discussion today.
All right. So let's talk about the evolution that we've gone through. So tell me about how is the evolution of credit unions tied to information technology, and what have been the biggest impacts in the past 20 years?
Absolutely, right. Obviously, technology changes at a lightning pace, right? But if you look back at the last 20 years, if we're going to frame it that way, I mentioned I've been in the industry 22 years, so I have a good experience that kind of overlaps that. My time as a server administrator in the data center space was every application had its own server and nothing was shared in terms of cluster and high availability capabilities. And then really several years later, the advent of virtualization and shared infrastructure and high availability and resiliency drove technology at a high pace there, but it really enabled organizations to really efficiently leverage their hardware and software investments and provide a lot of resiliency and seamless data movement within their data center, right? No longer you have single islands of applications and servers. Now you have a shared space where many applications and servers and workloads can be hosted on the same solution and just drive efficiency in that space. And really since then, the next leap was kind of the advent of the cloud, right? The ability to not only host your applications and workloads within your own data center or at a colo location, somebody else's data center, you're truly in the public cloud for some of your workloads, whether it be bursting your workloads into the public cloud, using the public cloud for disaster recovery, or just getting out of your data center altogether, no longer hosting your own applications, relying on the public cloud space for application access and protection. So in a nutshell, those have been the evolution in technology and the two major leaps that I've seen. It certainly applies to the credit union space, but many businesses have been able to take advantage of those technology leaps and evolution over the last 20 years. Jared, I don't know if you have a different opinion or perspective.
I totally agree, Ron. Those would be two of the key areas. I think also as things have continued to evolve, I think security has become really important, particularly in the credit union space. And the tools and techniques used to secure credit unions continues to evolve and grow. And much like the items that Ron hit on, if credit unions aren't staying up to date, it can be very challenging. So
Yeah.
that would be the only other items I'd touch on.
All right. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. What are the biggest information technology issues facing credit unions today?
I think Jared hit the nail right on the head with security, right? I was remiss to not mention that, right? You can't go a day without hearing in the news, data breaches, ransomware, companies being held on lockdown with encryption until they pay the attackers to get back access to their system. That's a major focus right now, and a huge issue for financial institutions and just all walks of industry that leverage technology, right? Everybody's kind of vulnerable and needs to protect themselves from these attacks. And it's not a matter of if, it's typically a matter of when. So when that happens, how do you detect it? How do you recover quickly from it? How do you keep from paying the bad guys? That's probably the number one issue facing credit unions and anybody that's in the technology space.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we hear all those things all the time, from credit unions and trying to navigate the potential security issues that could arise. How is information technology changing the financial landscape in 2022 and on?
I would say, you look at the amount of data that financial institutions have and leverage, right, and the ability to analyze that data and quickly act on that data to give themselves a competitive advantage or make their customers more money. Being able to take those data sets and have compute and analytics around that to be able to make sense of that data and make it actionable is a major technology leap, that the financial institutions are taking advantage of, right? And making, it's a competitive market, right? If you can't stay ahead of your competition with things like analytics and being able to leverage the data that you've had or you have and you've accumulated over the years, if you're not acting on that, you might stay in business, but you might lose your competitive edge.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, analytics these days are key, and being able to utilize them to make business decisions and changes is very important. Information technology, it infiltrates so many aspects of credit union operations and will only continue to do so. Do you have any suggestions or recommendations for ways that credit unions can streamline or consolidate their tech setup?
Yeah, I would say the number one challenge that we see in organizations, and I like to refer to it as technical debt, right? If you deploy an application or applications and then ignore it and don't stay current with it with patching and avoiding end of life scenarios for software and hardware, at some point that's going to become a problem, right? So staying on top of that and making sure you have a plan that once you put an application or workloads or infrastructure in place, it's not permanent, right? It needs care and feeding and will ultimately need some life cycle management, some refresh, some renew, some modernization. So recommendation for credit unions and other organizations that rely on technology, stay current, right? Work, within your own teams or with partners like Arraya to help, constantly evaluate your situation, staying ahead of the curve, avoiding situations where you're painted into a corner to do something quickly, and always having that roadmap. We like to talk about 3 and 5 year roadmaps, but at least have a 1 year to 18 months to 2 year roadmap, so you're staying ahead of the curve and making sure you're budgeting for, staying on top of your infrastructure.
Yeah, you had mentioned, as far as, staying on top of their game with analytics, but I mean, that also kind of comes into play with, fintechs and technologies that we're hearing about, since information technology, it's constantly changing and it's evolving. What is your advice to credit unions that are looking to stay on top of these new technologies?
Yeah, we typically like to use a couple different examples, but I'll pick on one example. You look at what Netflix did to Blockbuster, right? Ultimately, right? Blockbuster was great, right? Friday night going to to the store and grabbing your favorite movie if it's available. But when's the last time anybody did that, right? That you're essentially out of business, right? Now everybody's that instant gratification. You have an online service, you can get any movie you want anytime and pause and come back to it, and it's just great, right? So that's just one example of if the financial institutions, right, for example, aren't staying current with their technology, keeping their customers happy and a good digital and user experience, and then also leveraging analytics and data to stay sharp and ahead of the competition. You could potentially go to the way of Blockbuster. I don't want to be a doom and gloom person, but that's kind of where my head's at. Staying sharp, staying ahead of the curve from a technology and analytics and user experience point of view is going to keep your customers happy and keep your competitive edge and keep you in the business for the long haul.
Yeah, absolutely. Jared, did you have any additional comments regarding, the changing landscape and new technologies?
Yeah, I think some of what Ron was hitting on there aligns with what I was kind of thinking. But just thinking about how credit unions interact with their customers, and as technology changes and evolves and things modernize, there's an enormous amount of opportunity to connect with their customers more efficiently, provide services to their customers. But then I think also that risk of technical debt, if a credit union chooses to not kind of evolve with the technology, they could be left behind, much like Ron's Blockbuster example.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely something credit unions should take seriously and be looking at, capitalizing on, not getting left in the dust.
Yeah, absolutely. Should credit unions have a plan in place to stay, should they have something in place to continue to modernize their information technology? And, how often should they be reviewing these plans?
Yes, if you don't have that that continuous plan, right? Again, we kind of joke at the 3 to 5 year plan. It's nice to have a 5-year plan, but the chances of that, happening just how you laid it out, are with the way technology changes and business changes, isn't so realistic. But at least have most customers have like an annual budget cycle. Have an eye on your infrastructure or your cloud or your technology investment, and what are my compelling events? What's coming end of life? What new technology do I need to prepare for? What new business initiatives that the business is asking of IT do we need to be able to keep pace with and react to, right? So having that continuous plan, that continuous modernization plan, because nothing's permanent, I think is important. And I think the most success that we have working with customers are the customers that, yes, we might sell and implement a solution for them, and instead of calling us in 3 years or 5 years when it's time to refresh that, working with us on a quarterly basis or biannual basis, or at least an annual basis, to let's see how the infrastructure or solution is doing. Let's educate and talk about what's next, and let's help plan for the future. And we can help stay on top of that, 1 year to 2 year, technology plan. So you're never in a situation where you're forced to do something quickly and maybe haphazardly, and avoiding situations where you have technical debt. Nobody wants to be there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Jared, any final comments for our listeners in regards to information technology?
Yeah, I think that the biggest takeaway would just be the opportunity that's there. And that, again, instead of getting left in the dust with the technical debt, be opportunistic and have a plan. Finding a good partner that you can work with, I think, is also a big key. that can help you along the journey. So this would be my parting comments.
All right. Well, thank you, Jared, Ron. I really appreciate you taking the time today just to answer some of my questions about information technology. And I also want to thank Double Check for sponsoring this episode of Financial Minds Meet the Experts. Double Check is a member-driven NSF and overdraft program that gives your members the power to decide how their overdrafts are handled, meaning they determine what is to be paid, what is to be returned, and if there are other financial means they can utilize to cover any negative transactions. Double Check helps credit unions modernize their NSF and overdraft programs so that your members are happier, your staff is less stressed, and your bottom line continues to grow. Want to know more about the innovative NSF and overdraft program through Double Check? If so, please contact your Viso Financial Corporate Account Manager at accountmanagers@vfccu.org. Thank you again. Really appreciate you taking the time, and thank you to all of our listeners. Have a great day.